Hello everybody, so this week we're continuing with having a look at exam technique for conflict and tension and Hitler's foreign policy and steps to World War II. So in this lesson we're going to have a look at how to answer the question 3 questions. These are the write an account of, the ones where you've got to essentially write a story about what happened. So in this question you're demonstrating your knowledge and understanding of a sequence of events, of how things worked out over time. You're explaining 2 steps really of the sequence. Sometimes it's often like the background of the event and then what actually happened, and link each step back to the question. So it's going to be a 2-paragraph answer, this one. It can be answered in roughly 10 minutes. So in this lesson, we're going to focus on one particular example of this, and then we're going to have a look at one that you're going to tackle yourself and send in to your teacher. So this is the example that we're going to work through together. Write an account of how the events in Austria became an international crisis for 8 marks. So 2 paragraphs this time. Well, it's going to be kind of a classic type of this question. We're going to start off by talking about the background to the event. What happened before that invasion in 1938? Then we're going to look at the invasion of 1938 and the consequences, making sure, of course, that we link that back to international crisis. So on the next 2 slides, I'm going to talk you through in detail what would be in each of those paragraphs. What we're going to have a look at to start with then is we're going to have a look at the causes of the invasion, or the background to the event. So we're going to start off by thinking about, well, what happened in 1934? So in 1934, obviously Hitler had only been in power of Germany for a year, and a Nazi party had already been set up in Austria. Now, the Austrian Nazi Party rebelled and they actually murdered, assassinated the Chancellor of Austria, Dollfuss. Hitler wanted to get involved and help them and support them, and even kind of start the invasion process of Austria at that point. But he was particularly worried about the border with Italy. Italy shared the border with Austria as well as Germany, and there was a real fear that if Hitler invaded at that point, the Italians under Mussolini would have got involved. So in 1934 there was a hope that they could have taken it over, but Hitler had to stand down, he had to pull back from it and not really support the Austrian Nazi Party. However, in 1936 his luck changed. His luck changed at that point because he began his alliance with Mussolini and Italy. Remember, they'd fought alongside each other in the Spanish Civil War, helping to fight with the fascists under Franco, and they discovered they had loads in common: hatred of communism, and at that point making the Rhine-Berlin Axis, and then that being finalised and extended into the Anti-Comintern Pact with Japan in 1937. What that gave was a lot more confidence to Hitler in terms of Austria. He knew in the future that if he had another opportunity to invade Austria, if there was more problems with the Austrian Nazi Party, then he'd actually be able to help them, and Mussolini would do nothing to stop him because he was his friend, his ally. So nothing else occurred there for a little while, and then at the very beginning of 1938, the Austrian Chancellor Schuschnigg banned the Austrian Nazi Party because there'd been a huge amount of problems and disorder amongst the Nazi Party. And essentially what happened there was that led to a chain of events, which then led to a massive international crisis. So the banning of the Austrian Nazi Party, that really was the catalyst for everything that comes next. So that's the kind of stuff that we'll be talking about in our first paragraph. Okay, let's have a think then about our second paragraph. So our second paragraph is everything that happened after the banning of the Nazi Party. So we then have the rioting of the Austrian Nazis. So it all kicked off in the January with the banning of the party. Then what we get in February is the Austrian Nazis rioting, and at that point they are calling for union. They are calling for Anschluss. They are desperate to unite Austria and Germany. So the Austrian Chancellor at this point, a man called Schuschnigg, he decided that what he was going to do in order to settle it all down was he was going to organise a plebiscite, a vote. Now, this was a really sensible idea from Schuschnigg. However, it scared Hitler. Hitler feared that in a free vote, the Austrian people would not vote for union. So what he did instead in March was he invaded. So March 1938, he marched his troops into Vienna. What he then did was he spent a few weeks bombarding the Austrian people with propaganda. He arrested around 20,000 Austrians that he felt might be tricky and difficult to his campaign and his cause. And then in April of 1938, the actual plebiscite was held. It was massively controlled by the German army. But it was an overwhelming victory for Hitler and the Nazis, and an overwhelming vote for yes for Anschluss. 99.75% of the people who voted yes for Anschluss. This was a huge victory for Hitler. And so when we're talking about how it led to an international crisis, it's really down to that lack of intervention. Britain and France did nothing. Obviously, the Italians did nothing, because at this point they were allied with Germany. So there was this real lack of intervention. And what that convinced Hitler of was that Britain would always back down, and that they would never do anything to stop him. So this caused international crisis, because what it did was it instilled fear in other countries who were to the east. The Czechs were now incredibly worried. Stalin over in Russia and the USSR was really worried about what was coming next. And it made Britain dig even deeper into their policy of appeasement. So let's have a look at the model answer that I've produced here. So what I want you to notice is that most of the answer is me talking through what happened, but also making sure that I am relating it to international crisis as well, and showing how it caused a crisis. So troubles in Austria began in 1934. The Austrian Nazis rebelled and assassinated the Austrian Chancellor Dollfuss. Hitler had wanted to help them, but Mussolini had moved his army to the Austrian border, and Hitler was forced to back down. He could not risk a war with Italy, who also shared a border with Austria and would feel threatened by Germany's actions. In 1936, however, Hitler made the Axis alliance with Mussolini. This freed Hitler to try again. In January 1938, the Austrian Chancellor Schuschnigg banned the Austrian Nazi Party and arrested its leaders. This led to a chain of events which would be classed as an international crisis. So notice about that first paragraph a number of things that I've done. I'm clearly showing, aren't I, the chain of events and how this is kind of evolving over time. I've used dates on a regular basis here within this, and showing how things lead into another. Also, of course, at the end, I've related it to international crisis, and I've used some good detailed knowledge about the events. Let's have a look at my second paragraph. So in the second paragraph, I say, in February 1938, the Austrian Nazis rioted, calling for Anschluss. Hitler supported them. When Britain, France and Italy refused to intervene, Schuschnigg suggested a plebiscite to know whether the Austrian people wanted to be free. But Hitler couldn't guarantee he would get what he wanted. Therefore, on the 11th of March 1938, to prevent the plebiscite, fearing that he would lose, Hitler invaded. In April 1938, having arrested 20,000 Austrians, Hitler held a plebiscite, controlled by the German army, in which 99.75% voted for Anschluss. This caused a crisis, as Hitler was further convinced that Britain and France would always back down. It encouraged him to go further. Chamberlain realised that only military intervention would have stopped Hitler. It convinced him that he had to abandon collective security and use appeasement with Hitler. So again, lots of use of dates, facts, and then relating it to international crisis at the end. This is the kind of thing you need to do. You don't need to know necessarily months, but if you can put a few dates in there, it will really help to strengthen your answer. Your job now, Year 11, is to have a go at the question that is on the screen at the moment. Write an account of how problems relating to the Sudetenland led to an international crisis. It's very, very similar to the Austrian example that we've just looked at. You're going to start off by looking at the background. So your first paragraph is all going to be about, well, what is it that Hitler wanted? Why was the Sudetenland important? And obviously it's about what that land contained. And it was also about the same kind of things as was going on with Austria, the fact that the Sudeten Nazi Party had been stirring up trouble, that Czechs had been accused of atrocities against that 3 million strong population living in the Sudetenland. And of course, that led to an international crisis. Everyone was looking to the Sudetenland and fearing war, as Hitler demanded that that was handed over to him. So your first paragraph on this one would probably be quite short. Your second one would be a little bit longer, because then you'd focus on all those events of September of 1938. Chamberlain going across, of course, numerous times to meet with Hitler, first at Berchtesgaden, then at Bad Godesberg, and finally at Munich. You're going to talk about what happened in those meetings, of course briefly, but showing how events ebbed and changed, and at different points there was more likelihood of crisis and war. And of course, how then in the signing of the Munich Agreement on the 30th of September, it looked as if war was being avoided. But actually, the real issue here was that Hitler again had gained in confidence. So that's the kind of stuff that you need to be writing in that answer. Now, those of you who think, do you know what, I want a bit more of a challenge, because that's only a 10-minute question that you're being set today, you might want to have a look at this second question. Write an account of how the Nazi-Soviet pact led to an international crisis. And again, You're going to talk about the background first. You're going to talk about maybe the problems between Russia or the USSR and Germany. You're going to talk about those kind of, how Stalin felt that he'd been sold out by Britain and France and how he couldn't trust them. You're going to talk about how the deal came about, what the deal looked like in reality and what it was in paper. Ultimately, it led to the outbreak of World War II, didn't it? Because it led to Hitler feeling confident enough 9 days after the signing of the Nazi-Soviet pact to invade Poland. So have a go at that one if you fancy it. You have everything you need to answer these questions in the knowledge stuff that we've already gone through together. So have a go, but the one highlighted in yellow is the one you absolutely have to do for today, please.